Hello and welcome to another On This Day in Canadian Military History reaction video. My name is Brad St.Croix. I hold a PhD in history. I've worked on many different areas of that, including the First World War, Battle of Hong Kong, Normandy, Canadian Memory of War, all kinds of stuff, especially lots of different stuff on the channel itself and through my online brand that I run. I think I'm pretty well versed in history of Canada's military past. So hope you find my insights on these interesting. Or if you like what I've done or this one, please subscribe and like the video and comment below. It really helps me out, especially if you want something. If you see a video and you want me to take a look at it, please let me know. So today's is going to be looking at a video about the Battle of Vimy Ridge from April 1917. Obviously a very well-known battle within Canada. Lots of myths and misunderstandings around it and everything. So it's an interesting one that always gets attention and lots of attention. So this video is from a channel, again, I've just discovered. I haven't seen the video. This channel has 50,000 subscribers, and the video's been seen about 10,000 times. So it's interesting. Apparently it's the first video that this channel did. So that's interesting. So I'm kind of interested to see where this goes, how they go about it. Again, I'll say again, haven't seen it before, but some of the graphics look really interesting, and the channel does some different kinds of things. So it's always good to kind of get a different perspective and see how people present and think about Canadian history, particularly something so popular and well known as Vimy Ridge. So we're going to get into it and see what's waiting for us.
In December 1916, the leading of the successful counteroffensives in Verdun, French General Robert Nivelle was promoted Commander-in-Chief of the French armies of the Western Front. Nivelle prepared a massive joint offensive for 1917. The French would lead the main assault on the Aisne River, while the British would launch a diversion attack near Arras. At first, British generals were reluctant to be placed in a secondary position, but Nivelle promised to break through within 48 hours, and his enthusiasm blew away any remaining doubt. The goal was to link up with the British offensive and pierce the German front line once and for all. The French assembled 1,200,000 men and 7,000 artillery pieces for the offensive. However, these troop movements did not go unnoticed. Through aerial observation and information gathered from prisoners, German commanders understood that a major offensive was underway. On February 9th, they countered the planned offensive and launched Operation Normandy. During their withdrawal, to avoid the French to use the terrain, they blew up all railways and roads, destroyed all villages, and cut down all trees. This allowed to shorten the front line 40 kilometers and provided German reserves with an extra 14 divisions.
Yeah, so it's interesting setting up here, talking about the Nivelle offensive. Obviously, a very important part of this because that's, what the BEF role in the upcoming Arras offensive, which was going to go first, was to try and draw German attention away from that area. And obviously, things like the German withdrawal to the Hindenburg Line caused all kinds of issues. And that's what the period 1917 that came out a few years ago is about, German withdrawal, and he's trying to stop that whole attack on a really fortified position. That's like the whole plot of the movie. Anyway, so yeah, that's what he's talking about. Very interesting, and kind of Canada's role hopefully comes up shortly. But yeah, it looks good so far. I mean, the graphics are pretty cool, map's pretty interesting. So I like to see that. I really like seeing that.
Franchet asked permission to attack the Germans during the risky maneuver, but Nivelle refused, and the Germans slipped away. An increasing number of French generals grew concerned at the planned offensive. They claimed the element of surprise gone, and the new German reserves was alarming, as they could easily counterattack.
Well, shortening the line helps as well.
North, the Canadian Corps was facing Vimy Ridge.
Yep.
The Canadian Corps was led by British General Julian Byng.
Yep.
All 4 Canadian divisions faced a 7-kilometer front with the Vimy Ridge ahead of their position. The sector remained calm throughout 1916, and it gave time for the Germans to fortify the hill with concrete bunkers and reinforced trenches.
Yep.
Major General Curie visited French officers in Verdun after the battle. Together, they concluded that during the 1916 offensives, not enough autonomy was given to platoons. When an officer was killed, the entire unit would cease moving, as it was left without orders. Canadians prepared the assault on Vimy Ridge rigorously. For the first time, all Canadian units would fight side by side. Attack tunnels were built to bring soldiers as
Yeah, so that's obviously the big part of Vimy Ridge is all 4 Canadian battalions fought together for the first time. at the same time, right? They've been cycled in and out of battles before, but not all at once, attacking at once, right, as part of an offensive. And hopefully he mentions the British units as well, because this is not a Canadian only thing by any means. Just an example, right, of the tunnels themselves. They had existed in this area, in the Ross area, for hundreds of years. This isn't just a World War I thing. Excuse me. Also, like the French were here first, right? There's their failed attack on Vimy Ridge in 1915, and then also the British take over for a while, and then extend the network of tunnels and all of that. But also the Canadian Corps is heavily British dependent, from everything from them. Most of the average soldier being British born at this point, to everything to staff work is mostly British officers, and things like artillery and support are impossible for the Canadian Corps to do on their own, as they are just another corps. Some people are not going to like me saying that, but they're just another corps of the BEF, right? They're no different, right? Yeah, we have all these myths and everything, and we'll see if they come up, but it's very important to keep that in mind, that it's not just a Canadian effort here.
Close as possible to German lines. Some were even equipped with water and electricity
Yep.
to ensure swift victory. They took aerial photos
True.
and recreated German trenches in real life size.
Well, that's standard, but yeah.
Canadians knew the enemy trench system by heart.
Lots of practicing behind the lines.
Every sergeant was given a map of the offensive,
Mhm.
enough information for him and his unit to continue the attack on their own
Yep.
if necessary. General Home of the British First Army
First Army,
transferred
yep.
most of his heavy artillery to the Canadians to
Yep.
ensure the success of their mission.
Mhm.
7 out of 9 artillery groups were manned by British gunners.
Yep.
30,000.
Great to see this.
German General Ludwig von Falkenberg.
It's great to see the British involvement here.
For the Vimy sector. He
Yep.
was 76 years old in 1917.
Quite
He
old.
participated in most battles of the 1870 Franco-Prussian War, such as Gravelotte, Sedan, and the Siege of Paris. On the 2nd of April, 1 million shells were fired on the German positions. On the 2nd of April, 1 million shells were fired on German positions. He quickly understood that an offensive was underway.
Yep.
The bombardment destroyed communication trenches and prevented supplies from reaching the front lines. German soldiers were left without food or water for days.
Isolated.
Decent sleep was impossible under the pouring shells. Morale was low. However, Falkenhausen was confident that his reserves would counterattack in time against the imminent assault. One Canadian observer records that the shell...
Just quick there, I thought I was going to mention it, but the Germans, some of them call it the week of suffering, right? Because they're isolated so much by all the artillery planning. And hopefully he gets back to it, but also we can't remiss talking about the counter battery work under McNaughton. Later comes to more fame, quite famous at this point, really, as commander of the Canadian First Canadian Army in the Second World War. But anyway, his innovations and everything behind counter battery warfare are really on display at Vimy Ridge and really part of the success. But yeah, it's again just jumping in real quick. And yeah, it's really interesting to see that the artillery is mentioned as mostly British, and I guess the correct period flag, right? The correct ensign at the time of the First World War is also kind of cool to see.
Poured over our heads like water from a hose, thousands and thousands a day. Germans named this period the Week of Suffering.
There we go.
In total, 170,000 men faced Vimy Ridge. Amongst them, 97,000 of the Canadian Corps. They were supported by the 5th British Division.
Yep.
Facing them, the 1st Bavarian Division, the 79th Reserve Division, and the 16th Infantry Bavarian Division. 10,000 German soldiers were entrenched on the ridge, and 20,000 were kept in reserves. On Easter Monday, April 9th, 0530, 980 heavy artillery guns and 120 mortars unleashed their creeping barrage.
Yep.
On the right flank, the 6th battalions of the 1st Division launched the assault on the flat 4-kilometer front line. They faced little German resistance. At this point, most were shell-shocked or dead. The forward positions were easily captured.
Yep.
However, Canadian soldiers were slow to move as they were stuck in the plowed mud. They reached the Black Line 45 minutes later. Meanwhile, 700 Montrealers of the 14th Battalion were tasked to clean up the remaining trenches, recovering from...
He didn't mention, but the Black Line is one of the objective lines, right? Because you can see these are the front line trenches. And then the objectives change depending on which part of the front that we're on. And these ones are given further back objectives, but hopefully he gets into that.
From the shell shock, 4 German machine guns opened fire on them, and before the machine guns could be shut down, 265 Montrealers lay flat, killed or wounded.
Interesting sound effect there. I don't know if anybody recognizes that, but that is Age of Empires, I think, number 2 sound effect of troops being killed. That's different, but recognizable to me because I played that game a long time ago.
This wave resumed action after a 40-minute break from the Black Tunnel. The assault became disorganized, but small groups managed to...
Sound effects are a little distracting. Hard to hear them.
The 1st Canadian Brigade arrived in reinforcement for the second wave. They attacked the Red Line under the cover of fire and smoke from the neighboring village of Toulouse. They only faced demoralized German units and captured their positions. By then, only 2 battalions of the entire division were still able to fight. On their own, they captured the Brown Line by 12:26.
Another objective.
At 1300, the offensive was halted. The division advanced 5 kilometers in 1 day of combat, which was the greatest Allied advance in such a short time up to this point in the war.
It was a
also
big one.
captured 2,500 Germans, but at the cost of 2,500 killed and wounded. The second.
That's a good point to make here, is that yes, Vimy's a success in terms of its objective, and in terms of the overall Arras offensive, it's a limited one. But again, it's not without cost, a high cost at Vimy, right? It's seen as this technological advancement and marvel, right? In a lot of ways, it's presented in Canada, but it still had a high cost in blood, as all these offensives do in the First World War, which is not often mentioned in any sort of depth or detail. But this is good to see that's happening here.
Division, originating from Western Canada, faced the village of Toulouse and the woods of Hill 135. The British 13th Brigade was kept in reserve with 8 tanks. However, the tanks could not be used because of the mud. At 5:30, the 18th and 24th battalions were hit by heavy machine gun fire. Despite German resistance,
the sounds again.
They reached the Black Line by 6:10 and rested. The 21st and 25th battalions avoided enemy strongholds and captured the Red Line, while the French Canadian 18th and 20th battalions cleaned up the remaining trenches. The supporting British and Canadian brigades advanced for a second.
And here's more leapfrogging here.
135. A soldier of the 6th Brigade recalls wounded men who sprawled everywhere in the slime, in the shell holes, in the mine craters, some screaming to the skies, some lying silently, some begging for help, some struggling to keep from drowning in water-filled craters. The field swarming with stretcher bearers trying to keep up with the casualties. The British managed to capture the heights, and the Canadian found the village of Toulouse empty. The German contested Hill 135.
It's German doctrine to immediate counterattack.
1400, the 2nd Division stopped its offensive. 3rd Division faced steep slopes. Its objective was to capture the summit of the ridge. The 7th and 8th Brigade advanced on the ground.
On the highest points here.
They stormed out and surprised the German defenders from behind.
Yep.
The Princess Patricia
the tunnels
marched towards the enemy at the sound of bagpipes. At 6:25, Black Line was reached. German defenses were shattered and entire units retreated beyond the ridge. The 7th Brigade protected its flanks because the 4th Division was struggling. Major General Watson and his 4th Division
had
the hardest objective. Hill 145, the highest point of the ridge where Germans could see the entire Canadian Division defense.
Dominating position. Still is.
Worse, the artillery barrage failed to destroy the fortified defenses and concrete bunkers. At 5:30, the assault was launched.
Interesting. There are obviously the bombardment wasn't as effective, but again, there's debate about why that is, and Watson's to blame in some way, shape, or form for that, for not wanting it to go as far effective as it could have.
Hill 145 was to be taken by the 11th Brigade alone. From their elevated position, the Germans on Hill 145 fired at the flank of the advancing Canadians all over Vimy Ridge. Canadians reached the hill at 6:40, but only after bitter fighting. The 102nd Battalion suffered 340
heavy casualties for 145. So many.
Division headquarters wanted to use this trench to further coordinate.
Here it is.
So the artillery was ordered not to fire on it. When the 87th Battalion approached Battle Trench, machine guns ripped
heavy casualties. The 87th.
To their left, a mine exploded in the German trenches facing the 12th Brigade, allowing them to swarm German defenses. The following day, on April 10th, in late afternoon, 2 companies of the 85th Battalion of
Real quick pause there with the mining is very interesting. It's part of this offensive, yes, obviously. But it had been prevalent the entire time, right? French had done it, the British had done it. Just because it's that, if anyone's been there to the tunnels, it's just very easy, chalky ground to dig into. That's why this place is full of tunnels for a long time. It's just easy to do. Relatively speaking, it's not like bedrock, right? It's a little easier. But again, this had been going on for a long time. This isn't just a Canadian thing here again. Like the landscape is, pockmarked with shell holes, especially, but bigger ones from the mining. And some of them are older. They're not from, April 1917. Again, something to keep in mind with what happened before.
Nova Scotia Highlanders were tasked to raid Hill 145. It was their first time in battle, and they didn't even receive their traditional kills. At 1800, Lieutenant Colonel Borden preferred a quick action without artillery cover to keep the element of surprise. Out of a sudden, 2 companies of screaming Scots fixed bayonets and charged the hill.
Good bit of music.
To gain control of the summit of Hill 145. They lost 47 killed and 122 wounded, about 70% of their initial Highlanders. 20 Germans surrendered and 72 were killed, most shot while running away from the melee. On April 10th, the following day, the front line stabilized as German reserves managed to push the Canadians out of the village of Vimy. However, none of their multiple attempts to recapture the hill were successful. No major actions were recorded on the 11th. On April 12th, the 10th Brigade attacked the Pimple and thus officially ended the Battle of Vimy Ridge. The Canadian Corps completed all its objectives, but at a cost of 10,000.
Just real quick, hopefully I can talk about it further, but the Pimple was much harder to take than it seems here. It was a very difficult position, held up for a very long time after numerous attacks. So I'm not sure why that was not talked about, but not an easy position to take. And Hill 145, yeah, it was very fierce fighting. And again, he highlights that they were pushed out of Vimy, which was true, but eventually it was taken.
1,602 casualties, 3,598 killed, and 7,000.
That's a lot of casualties for the Canadian Corps.
With most casualties suffered on the first day.
Yep.
They also captured 4,000 Germans and inflicted thousands of additional casualties. Field Marshal von Hindenburg removed Falkenhausen from his command, failing to use his reserves in time to counterattack the enemy. Germans did not consider the battle as a defeat, as Allied forces were unable to break through, and Germans simply accepted the loss of Vimy Ridge and withdrew to the Oki.
So it looks like we're coming to the end here, but just jumping in real quick. Falkenhausen is removed from command, whether it's about the reserves or his failure to heed new doctrine, right, of lightly holding the front lines and then strengthening your reverse hill defense, which is what the German army had become relying on at this point, and uses it to great effects in the other parts of the Arras offensive and then in the Nivelle offensive as well. That's part of it too, right? Why Falkenhausen is removed. Age may be something to do with it, but he is definitely removed from command, particularly in this sector and shipped off somewhere. I think somewhere else. I can't remember. He's given a minimal command somewhere. So that was an interesting one. No, it was good. I liked it. I really did like that one. Lots of good things to like there. It's well done in terms of the information, showing the units. I like the maps. I like the animation. That was really, really cool. Sound effects were kind of distracting. I mean, I got kind of why, because the whole video game feel, which obviously is very popular when you kind of add video game stuff. People like it. So again, it's not really blaming the creator of that for that. It's just sometimes it was a little loud. Couldn't hear what he was talking. He was getting some good commentary. So I did enjoy that. Looks like he was trying to keep it around the 10-minute mark. So maybe that's why some things were omitted, which again is completely fair for YouTube. And for a first effort, I thought that was really, really good. Definitely better than some of my first efforts. So kudos to him. I'll link the original down below. And also I have a Vimy Ridge playlist as well on the channel. And I'll link that down below for you to check out. Lots of discussions and videos from the second day mostly, because there's hardly any footage, like film footage from the first day. It's mostly afterwards. So yeah, it's an interesting battle. Obviously has an important part to play in Canadian mythos of the war, First World War. And even more in general, it's taken on life really bigger than it should have, to be honest, in my opinion. There's far greater feats accomplished by the Canadian Corps in the First World War than Vimy Ridge. Stuff in the 100 Days. Canal du Nord is one of them, in my opinion. So yeah, it was good to see, though, that the video avoided the tropes, really, of nationhood. I don't think he mentions it at all, which is good to see. Notes that it's important, but it's not repeating those myths that this is a nation-building event, because a lot of that is said after the fact, especially a lot of it 50 years later during the centennial, right? That's when most of those things about Vimy Ridge are actually said. It's this nation, this whole idea that Canada becomes from Vimy Ridge. They marched up the ridge as, Ontarians and Maritimers and from the prairies and what have you, and then came down Canadians. It's not there's no documented really proof of that. There's some, but not very, very much, and it comes much later. So I'm quite happy that was avoided in as commentary here. So that's great. So yeah, it looks like this channel is pretty good. He's got some interesting stuff, a lot all over the different areas in military history. So maybe I'll check out some more of that. But hopefully you enjoyed this one, looking at Vimy Ridge. Obviously, there's lots on Vimy Ridge, so I might come back to this at some future point, maybe. We'll see. But hopefully, yeah, I enjoyed this one. And check out, I do suggest checking out the original video without me, giving commentary over it. It's a really interesting one, cool thing to check out, especially for the maps. Yeah, a lot of you know I love maps, and this is a good one for the maps. So again, thanks for watching, and check out some other reaction videos. I'll link the playlist for those down below. So I'll check those out. Have a good day, and I'll see everybody next time.